So we're on page 30. We want to take a few minutes to really review passive transport first, especially osmosis, because this is a really difficult concept. It requires a lot of practice. Remember, first, we're always calculating how much solute there is and how much water there is, because we know that water will diffuse from high to low. So whenever you have an example where you're putting a cell inside of water, you want to figure out where is there the most water. So remember, like we saw, distilled water is 100% water. That means there's a lot of water outside, and water will move into the cell. Please draw this with me. As water moves in, the cells will swell and burst. This is actually why you can die from drinking too much water. There was a radio contest once where a lady drank gallons and gallons of water and she died because her cells burst, because all that water moved in and caused her cells to swell. But she could also die if you drank salt water, because if we put your cells in salt water, high salt equals low water outside. That means that water will move from high to low. If we have high water inside the cells compared to the outside, if there's high amounts of water, water will move out, your cells will shrink and shrivel, and you can die drinking salt water too. So what we have to do is just figure out, where is there more solute, like salt? Wherever there's more solute, there's less water. And then we can figure out which way water will move. This is important for plant roots. This is actually how you kill a slug if you want. Vegetables in the grocery store are sprayed with water. So osmosis is happening around you all the time. We did also go ahead and take notes about how the concentration gradient can affect cell transport, and the amount of energy or temperature can affect cell transport. So all of this is talking about what happens when you put a cell in an environment. But that doesn't help the cell maintain homeostasis. We just saw cells swelling and bursting or shrinking and dying. How does a cell maintain its environment? And so this is where we see cell adaptations. There are cells that live in fresh water, including fish. Think about a fish that lives in a pond. Water is constantly moving in. These organisms also have adaptations to help them. One of the adaptations that you need to know is called a contractile vacuole. The vacuole will store water and then actually contract and pump the water out. There are other adaptations if you live in a saltwater environment. If you live in salt water, you're constantly losing water. And so these organisms will they'll drink in the salt water, but then they'll pump the salt out. But this doesn't mean that I can take a freshwater fish and put them in salt water, because we want to know that adaptations are from your DNA. And you can't change your DNA. So these are ways that organisms can control their cell reactions. But all of this idea of pumping requires energy. And so our last section of notes is on what's called active transport. You'll notice this is all underlined, and that's on purpose, because it's something you need to try to memorize and practice. But the word active should definitely make you think of needing energy. Active transport happens for one of two reasons. Either because you have large molecules, that's one reason. If it's a really big molecule, it takes a lot of energy to move it. Or because you're moving molecules against the concentration gradient. What this means is low to high, but that also can mean to collect or pump. So active transport happens when we are pumping something or when we're gathering things. So if you look here at this picture that you have in your notes, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these square shapes already inside the cell. And there's only 2 outside, but we're continuing to move them in. So this is active transport. Cells are also able to eat or consume a food particle or liquid, and that's also going to require energy. And so these notes are finishing up talking about how cells are able to transport, which is one of the important cell functions. In our next set of notes, we'll be talking about where we get that ATP from. But for now, all that you need to know is that active transport requires energy. So that's the end of the notes. Make sure that you do that summary box. Remember, you need 2 vocabulary words and to refer to a diagram.